All right, welcome in. It's time for the whistle stop. He is the voice of the referees, Elliot. He is the voice of the players, Andrew. And I'm just a guy watching soccer on my couch. It's the big thing that we live in now, VAR, the world of VAR, the era of VAR. And one of the big frustrations that a lot of people have, and I think VAR has sparked a lot of frustration between, at least from the fan perspective, and I'm sure the players as well, is when it comes to the offside rule, because it's really where VAR makes almost an appearance every match. Elliot, how has VAR changed the way that offside is officiated from the ref point of view?
It's had a real big impact. So pre-VAR, a linesman, when an assistant referee, when confronted with a marginal decision, is just going to have to either raise the flag for offside or keep it down. And there's a certain margin for error that we all have to put up with. With the introduction of VAR, the mechanic has changed, the decision-making process has changed. So now the process is where there's a very clear attacking situation, for example, a one-on-one. If there's a marginal offside decision and inside the AR's head, they're thinking, this is offside, but let's wait and see. The flag will stay down. They'll keep up with play. They'll let the attacking phase play out. And if that results in a goal or a penalty, then VAR can come back and fix it. And the idea is there that we don't end up with those injustices of a goal given that shouldn't have been. What VAR can't do is intervene where play is stopped for an offside. Where the flag goes up for an offside, play stops. You can't correct that with VAR. So that's the reason why the flag is delayed, to let the attacking phase play out. So it's resulted in a little bit of probably a greater degree of accuracy at the end of the day, but maybe at the cost of the time it takes to reach the decision. I would say that's the main thing.
So basically the referee, essentially, to not blow dead a clean play, has to kind of just always give the attacking side the benefit of the doubt for that moment.
For that moment, yes. And the idea is it's justice delayed by a few seconds, but not justice denied.
Andrew, your thoughts on all of this?
I've never played in a match with VAR, let alone a referee holding down his flag because of it. But it has to be frustrating as a player to play 10 seconds, 20 seconds, maybe a minute, maybe 2 minutes after a potential offside, and all for it just to be called back for what happened 2 minutes ago. It's certainly not a perfect solution. I've been getting a lot of questions about this. Why was this the procedure that was implemented? Is it really benefiting anyone? There's also some more questions I'll kind of get into, but I think a great example, and the one that sparked the most controversy, was the recent Newcastle versus Man City match.
Yeah.
We're not going to show it because of copyright issues, but I'm sure many of you are familiar. It's the play where Newcastle was in on goal. The assistant referee kept his flag down. The play continued. At the end of the play, essentially what happened was there was a collision between Ederson and I believe a Newcastle attacker. And he came off. He was injured, and I think he came off because of this injury. The AR had then subsequently raised his flag, and they went back for the offsides. So there's a big question over if this is beneficial, at least to the players. And certainly not. The fans have their own issues with it. But
yeah, there is always that looming worry that was like, well, if you let a play that should be dead continue on, something bad might happen. And we finally happened. Something bad happened. One of the top keepers in the league gets hurt in a play that shouldn't have existed.
Yeah, absolutely. Elliot, what are your thoughts? Do you think it's more of a pro than a con?
I think that's a great question, and the things we're talking about are all relevant. I think VAR, we're still teething with it. I like the aspiration of working towards getting decisions right. I think a lot of people might be willing to pay some price in taking the time to reach that decision, but the risk of player injury is a real big one. I think the variables that we can play with is one, what is a very clear attacking situation? How obvious an attacking situation does it have to be for an AR to keep their flag down to let it play out? Is one thing. And then what degree of certainty does the AR need to have in the offside decision in order to say, yes, I think it's offside, but I'm going to keep my flag down? So I think those are the two variables. There have been some examples where it's so obviously offside, despite it being a clear attacking situation, that I think everyone would accept the assistant referee's flag going up, denying a clear attacking situation, but it was just such an obvious offside. So I think those are the areas we can play with.
Yeah, how does it change the psychology of an AR when basically the hardest decision you always have to make is keeping that line, and now you kind of don't as much anymore, or it's just you keep a much softer line, and you kind of really are almost giving up that portion of your job to the eye in the sky?
I guess the danger is relying overly on VAR, thinking I've got this safety net, I'm going to not make a decision here and let VAR do its job. Now that's different from keeping the flag down because you think a player is not offside. That's making a decision. Putting the flag up when you think when they're offside, that's making a decision. But using VAR as a safety net, yeah, that can be a mental pitfall. Remember, pre-VAR as well, it was a fine art between the referee and the assistant referee when calling offside decisions, because it's not an offence to be in an offside position. It's an offence when you play the ball or make an attempt to play the ball or gain an advantage. That's where the offence takes place. So linesmen, I keep calling them linesmen, assistant referees still had the mechanic of seeing a player in an offside position and waiting for them to become active before the flag goes up. And so even then, even pre-VAR, there was the possibility of an injury to, let's say, a goalie by allowing a challenge to happen that could have been prevented with an earlier flag. So it's not a completely new debate, but I think it's put more of it's expanded the number of examples in a game where it happens. So it's more risky.
Elliot, question for you here from a friend of the pod, from Drew Ashcraft. He says, I feel that we are kneecapping ARs, and an extension of the play that they would have put their flag up may allow for injuries. Let's go back to the first part there. Do you feel that we are kneecapping the assistant referees, and do we feel that even if we are, is that a bad thing?
I think if we are, yes, it's a negative thing, because you still want the on-field decision to be between the referee and the assistant referees. So I think wherever possible, we want the ref to do their job, the assistant ref to do their job, and as a team to do their job. And VAR can come in where needed to correct an error. But I don't think, I think it would be a mistake for us to, an assistant referee to absolve themselves of making a decision because they know they have the safety net of VAR. I think that would be an error. It would result in the loss of credibility on the field, and that's a really important thing that the referee team need to have.
One point I would really love to make, and if possible, we'll throw this onto the screen here, but the Newcastle Man City example was a really fascinating one. I was getting into some heated debates with some friends, and they were trying to make the claim that it was several yards offside and it was obvious, and that the referee he made an obvious error. He should have put the flag up. If it's that obvious, he shouldn't have to wait for VAR.
He was being too complacent, too reliant. Is that what they were saying?
Essentially. And they were arguing that, a certain amount of yards offsides, they should be able to put their flag up. And I was saying it was irrelevant. And my point was, and I actually took a screenshot of the offside, and I what I did, you can see. So when the assistant referee, people just don't keep this. They don't. I think it'd be so amazing if everyone was an AR for a couple games, because they don't realize how hard it is to both look at the ball as it's being struck and the offside line. Like, you literally have to be looking in two completely different angles, and it is one of the hardest things. It's for me, I'd much rather be a center, because you don't have to do that. That is the hardest decision to make. And so in that Newcastle versus City example, the angles that the referee had to work with, because that ball was very close to his touchline, you can actually see it as the ball is struck. His head is still kind of facing towards the ball, because he has to be. He doesn't know when it's going to be struck. He has no choice. And then this line, it's almost a 90-degree angle here, and it's so difficult for him to move his head and see at the same second that that ball is being struck if it's offside. So yes, when you take a screenshot of it and you see that the player was off by 3 yards, you may think, oh, that was obvious. But in a millisecond, when you have to look in both directions, and both the forward line and the defensive line are doing this, it's just near impossible to say with certainty it was offside. So I'm sure in his head he was he obviously came back and raised his flag, so he did a great job. But there's no way he could have been certain enough to call it in that moment. And I wish the media would talk about that more. That difficulty of seeing both the ball being struck and the offside line is just such a huge challenge, and ARs just don't get enough credit. Okay, that's it.
That was a great point to make.